The massive space station hung in the darkness like a metal moon. Its surface was covered with lights that blinked in patterns no human could understand. Inside the station, alien beings from across the galaxy gathered in a great hall that stretched. As far as the eye could see, Captain Tejo walked slowly down the center aisle. His boots made soft sounds on the strange metal floor. Round him, hundreds of alien creatures watched with eyes that glowed different colors. Some had no eyes at all. Others had too many to count. The captain wore his best uniform, but it looked simple compared to the golden robes and crystal armor of the beings around him. He kept his face calm even though his heart was beating fast. This was the moment that would decide the future of all humanity. At the front of the hall sat the Galactic Council. 12 beings from 12 different worlds made the laws for this part of space. They had ruled for thousands of years before humans ever learned to make fire. Commander Huck rose from his seat in the center. He was tall and thin like a walking stick. His skin was blue-white like ice, and when he moved it made sounds like wind through glass. 4 arms stretched out from his body, each one ending in fingers that were too long and too sharp. "So," Commander Huck said in a voice that sounded like winter storms, "these are the humans we have heard so much about." The other council members made sounds that might have been laughter. To the left sat 2 creatures made entirely of living crystal. They sparkled in the light like diamonds, but their faces showed no kindness. These were the Viridians, and they had ruled ice worlds for millions of years. On the right floated 3 beings that looked like colored smoke given form. They were the Nethans, who lived in the cold gas between stars. They did not have solid bodies, but somehow they could still speak. "They look so weak," said one of the crystal beings. Her voice rang like breaking glass. "Their bodies are soft. They have no scales, no armor, no protection at all. And so small," added one of the gas creatures. His voice whistled like air through a narrow hole. "How do they survive on their little warm planet without any real strength?" Captain Tejo said nothing. He had been warned that this would happen. The aliens always started by trying to make humans feel small and helpless, but he had seen what humans could do when they had to survive. He had faith in his species. Commander Huck raised one of his 4 hands, and the hall became quiet. "Humans of Earth," he said, "you have come to us asking for a place in our great civilization. You want to trade with us, learn from us, and travel. Among the stars as we do?" "That is correct," Captain Tejo replied. His voice was steady and strong. "But why should we allow this?" asked the crystal being. "What can your species offer us that we do not already have? You have no great technology, cannot survive in space without machines to help you. Your minds are limited, are fragile." Other aliens in the hall made more sounds of agreement. Some hissed, others clicked, few roared softly. Commander Huck moved to the center of the floor. As he walked, the temperature around him dropped. Frost began to form on the metal surfaces near his feet. "There is a way for your species to prove itself," he said. "For 10,000 years, we have used the same test for all new species who wish to join us. We call it the ice test." The captain felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air around the alien commander. "The test is simple," Hugh continued. "Your best representatives will enter our testing chamber. It is a world of ice and cold that we have created to break the spirit of any creature. The temperature falls to levels that would freeze your blood solid in seconds. The wind never stops howling. Food is scarce. Shelter is nearly impossible. To build." The crystal beings sparkled brighter, as if this idea pleased them greatly. "You will have 7 days to survive," the commander said. 7 days with only basic tools and the clothes on your backs. If you can endure this test, humanity will be welcome among us. If you fail." He did not finish the sentence, but everyone in the hall understood. Failure meant humanity would be left alone in space forever. "How many species have taken this test?" Captain Tejo asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Many," replied one of the gas beings. 12 different species in the last 1,000 years? Some lasted only hours. The strongest made it 3 days before the cold broke their minds and bodies. None have ever completed the full 7 days, added the crystal creature with obvious satisfaction. Captain Tejo looked around the great hall. Every alien face watched him with the same expression. They expected him to refuse. They wanted him to admit that humans were too weak for this challenge. Instead, the captain straightened his shoulders and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the massive room. Humanity accepts your challenge. A wave of surprised sound swept. Through the hall, some aliens clicked rapidly. Others made deep rumbling noises. The gas beings swirled faster, showing their excitement. Commander Huck leaned forward, and his ice-blue eyes seemed to glow brighter. You accept knowing that no species has ever survived? I accept knowing that no species before us was human, the captain replied. Very well, the commander said after a long pause. Choose your 3 representatives. They will enter the chamber in one cycle of this station's rotation. It gives you 12 hours to prepare. The captain nodded. He already knew who would. Take the test. 3 humans had volunteered for this mission knowing they might never return home. They were the best humanity had to offer. One more thing, called out the crystal being. You should know that other species will take the test alongside your people. 2 of our own Viridian warriors, 1 Nethon explorer, and a Skalan survivor specialist. They will compete against your humans to show the difference between your weak species and our strong ones. When your people fail, added the gas being, you will see how real survivors handle the cold. Captain Tejo smiled for the first time since entering the hall. We look forward to the competition, he said simply, as he turned and walked back down the long aisle. The aliens around him made more sounds of amusement. They had seen this confidence before from other species. It never lasted long in the ice, but Captain Tejo was not worried. He knew his people. He knew what humans could do when everything seemed impossible. The aliens thought they understood survival, but they had never met anyone who came from a world where survival meant adaptation. The test would begin soon, and the galaxy would learn something new about the species called humanity. The chamber doors opened with a sound like breaking bones. Cold air rushed out so fast it created clouds of ice crystals in the warm corridor. The temperature dropped so quickly that water in the air turned to snow before it could fall to the ground. 3 humans stood at the entrance wearing simple winter clothes and carrying basic packs. Engineer Sunman checked his small bag of tools one last time. Biologist Biora pulled her coat tighter and studied the frozen landscape ahead. Survival specialist Dong Wu breathed slowly and calmly, preparing his mind for what was coming. Remember, Captain Tejo said quietly, you are not just representing yourselves. You carry the hopes of every human being. Sun Min nodded. He was a thin man with quick hands and smart eyes. He had built machines from scrap since he was a child. If anyone could find a way to make useful things from nothing, it was him. Bora touched the small notebook in her pocket. She had studied every kind of plant and animal on Earth. She knew how living things survived in impossible places. Her job was to find life in this dead world of ice. Dong-Wu said nothing, but his eyes were already scanning the chamber. He had lived through disasters that killed other people. He knew how to find food, water, and shelter when there seemed to be none. His calm face showed no fear. Good luck, the captain whispered. The 3 humans walked into the chamber. Behind them came the alien competitors. 2 Viridian warriors moved like walking jewels, their crystal bodies sparkling even in the dim light. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. The Nethan explorer floated beside them like a cloud of purple gas. Its form shifted and changed as it moved, sometimes looking almost human, sometimes becoming just colored air. Last came the Skalan survivor, looked like a giant lizard that walked on 2 legs. Scales covered its body like natural armor, and its eyes were cold and calculating. The chamber doors slammed shut with a final, echoing bang. The world inside was like nothing any human had ever seen. Wind howled across a landscape of ice that stretched to the horizon. The sky was dark gray, filled with clouds that dropped snow like tiny knives. Strange blue lights flickered in the distance, casting dancing shadows on the frozen ground. The cold hit them like a physical blow. It went through their clothes and bit at their skin. The air was so thin it was hard to breathe. Each breath came out as white fog that froze and fell like powder. -150 degrees, Biora said through chattering teeth, reading a small device from her pack. The air has almost no oxygen. This place is designed to kill us. The alien competitors immediately spread out across the chamber. They had done this before and knew what to do. The two Viridian warriors found a cluster of ice formations that looked like giant crystals growing from the ground. They touched the ice with their hands, and it began to change. Within minutes, they had shaped a shelter that looked like a beautiful palace made of frozen glass. The Nethan explorer simply flowed into a crack in the ground. Its gaseous body could fit into spaces that solid creatures could never enter. It found a cave system under the ice and disappeared from view. The Scalen survivor began digging with its powerful claws. Ice and frozen dirt flew everywhere as it burrowed deep into the ground. Soon it had created a tunnel that led to a hidden chamber below. The watching aliens in the control room above made sounds of approval. This was how the test was supposed to work. Each species used its natural abilities to create shelter and safety. But the humans did something different. Instead of looking for shelter first, they began walking around the chamber. They picked up pieces of metal and plastic scattered across the ice. To the watching aliens, it looked like they were collecting garbage. "What are they doing?" asked one of the crystal beings in the control room. Commander Huck watched the humans with growing confusion. "I do not know. They should be building shelter, or they will freeze to death within hours." Suman filled his pack with pieces of broken metal, plastic tubes, and chunks of what looked like old machinery. The other competitors had ignored these things completely, but he saw something they missed. "These are not random pieces of junk," he told his teammates quietly. "Someone was here before us. These are pieces of equipment from other test takers." Biora knelt by a chunk of ice and scraped at it with a small knife. Inside the ice, she could see dark spots that looked almost like seeds or eggs. "There is life here," she whispered excitedly. "Frozen, but still alive. If I can wake it up somehow, we might have food." Dongwu found a spot where the wind was blocked by a wall of ice. The ground here was covered with a thin layer of something that was not quite ice and not quite dirt. "This will do," he said simply, while the aliens built grand shelters using their natural powers. The humans began their own project. Dongwu cleared a small area of ground. Seungmin arranged pieces of metal in a careful pattern. Ara gathered the strange ice chunks she had found. From their packs, they pulled out simple tools: a small fire starter, some chemical tablets, a few pieces of cloth and rope. Nothing that looked impressive to the alien observers. As the first night began to fall, the temperature dropped even further. The wind grew stronger and more vicious. Ice crystals in the air became so thick they created a blizzard that made it impossible to see more than a few feet. The Viridian warriors retreated deep into their crystal palace. The walls glowed with inner warmth, protecting them from the storm. The Nethan explorer sealed itself into its underground cave. Its gaseous form spread through the tunnel system, finding the warmest spots to rest in. The Scalen survivor closed the entrance to its burrow with a sheet of ice. Inside, it began to slow its breathing and heart rate, preparing for a long hibernation. But the humans stayed outside in the storm. Dong Dashwu struck his fire starter again and again. Each time, a tiny spark appeared for just a moment before the wind blew it out. The watching aliens laughed at this primitive attempt to create warmth. "Fools," said one of the crystal beings. "Fire cannot survive in this environment." But Seungmin had arranged the metal pieces to create a windbreak. And Dongwu had patience that came. From years of survival training, on the 20th try, a small flame caught. It flickered and almost died, but the humans protected it with their bodies. Slowly, carefully, they fed it with the materials Biora had gathered. The flame grew larger. Not much, but enough to create a small circle of warmth in the endless cold. The three humans huddled around their tiny fire as the storm raged around them, looked small and weak compared to the grand shelters of their competitors. But they were still alive, and their fire was still burning in the control room. Commander Huck leaned forward and stared at the small flame. "Impossible," he whispered. The second day began with no sunrise. The chamber had no sun, only the same gray light that made everything look dead and hopeless. But something had changed during the night. The humans were still alive. In the control room above, Commander Huck stared at the viewing screens with growing confusion. The other alien observers gathered around him, their voices filled with disbelief. "How are they still breathing?" asked one of the crystal beings. The temperature dropped to -200 degrees during the night. Even we had to use extra energy to stay warm. "Their fire should have died hours ago," added a gas creature. "There is barely any oxygen in that chamber. Nothing should be able to burn." But the human fire was not only still burning, it was bigger than before. Dongwu had stayed awake through the entire night, feeding the flames with careful precision. He had found that certain pieces of debris burned longer than others. Some gave off more heat. Others produced less smoke that might poison them in the thin air. Sung-Min had not been idle either, while his teammates slept in short shifts around the fire. He had worked on a strange construction. Using pieces of metal and plastic from their collection, he had built something that looked like a maze of tubes and chambers. "What is that device?" Bora asked, as she woke up and saw his work. "Heat trap," Sung-Min replied simply. He pointed to where warm air from their fire entered one end of his construction. "The hot air goes through these passages. It warms up the metal. The metal stays warm longer than the air, so we get more heat from the same fire." Biora smiled. It was a simple idea, but brilliant. While the aliens used their natural abilities, humans used their minds. She had made her own discoveries during the night. The ice chunks she had collected were not just frozen water. They contained organic materials that could burn. Some had minerals that created different colored flames. Others had substances that burned very hot for a short time. "Look at this," she said, showing her teammates a piece of blue ice. "When I put this in the fire, the flames turn green and give off twice as much heat. There are resources here that the test makers never expected anyone to find." The three humans worked together to improve their situation. Sung-Min built better tools from the debris around them. Biora identified which materials were most useful for fuel, heat, or construction. Dongwu organized everything with the calm efficiency of someone who had survived many disasters. By midday, their small camp looked completely different from the night before. What had been a tiny fire surrounded by 3 cold humans was now an organized base with multiple heat sources, wind barriers, and even a rough shelter. The alien competitors, meanwhile, were having problems. The Nethan Explorer had seemed comfortable in its underground cave system the first night. But as the second day progressed, something was going wrong. Its gaseous form was becoming less stable. The extreme cold was affecting it in ways that surprised everyone. "The Nethan is condensing," observed one of the scientists in the control room. "Its gas form cannot maintain cohesion at these temperatures." In the chamber, the purple gas that was the Nethan Explorer was beginning to form liquid droplets. It tried to flow back into its cave, but parts of itself kept freezing to the walls. For the first time in the test, it looked afraid. The Viridian warriors were also struggling. Their crystal bodies were strong, but the constant temperature changes were causing stress fractures. One of them had developed a crack that ran from its head down to its chest. Crystal beings were tough, but they were not invincible. The Scalan survivors seemed to be doing better, remained in its burrow hibernating through the worst of the cold, but hibernation was not living. It was just a way to avoid death a little longer. The humans, however, were not just surviving. They were exploring. In the afternoon, Sung-Min made an important discovery. The debris scattered around the chamber was not random. It was arranged in patterns that told a story. These pieces came from 12 different attempts, he told his teammates, pointing to groups of similar materials. 12 different species tried this test and failed. Each group left behind their equipment when they died or gave up. Biora examined the patterns more carefully. Each species tried to solve the problem the same way. They built one big shelter and tried to wait out the 7 days. But look at how far apart these debris fields are. They never work together. They never shared resources. Dongwu nodded slowly. They competed against each other instead of competing against the cold. That is why they failed. This revelation changed everything. Humans realized that they were not just in a survival test. They were in a puzzle that required thinking differently from every species that had come before. The test is not designed to see if we can survive the cold, Sungmin said with growing excitement. It is designed to see if we can adapt and innovate under pressure. They began to see the chamber with new eyes. What looked like a frozen wasteland was actually a resource field. Every piece of debris was a tool waiting to be used. Every ice formation was a potential source of materials. An opportunity to create something new. By evening of the second day, humans had built something that amazed even themselves. Their base now included multiple interconnected shelters, each designed for a different purpose. One area was for sleeping, warmed by Sungmin's heat trap system. Another was for food preparation, where Biora processed the organic materials she found. A third was for tool making, where they could work with the salvaged materials. The most impressive part was the heating system. Instead of one fire, they now had a network of small flames connected by metal tubes. Heat flowed through their entire base like blood through veins. They had created their own warm environment in the middle of the frozen hell. The alien observers watched in shocked silence. "They're not just surviving," Commander Huck said quietly. "They are building a civilization." The Nethan explorer made a desperate attempt to reach the human base. Its form was becoming more unstable by the hour, and it seemed to understand that the humans had found something important. But when it tried to approach their warm area, Dongwu stepped forward and blocked its path. "No," the human said simply. "We do not help competitors who would not help us." The gas being tried to force its way past, but its weakened form could not push through a determined human. It retreated to its cave, but everyone could see that it was failing. One of the Viridian warriors also approached the human base. The crack in its crystal body had grown larger, and it moved with obvious pain. But when it reached out toward their fire, Bora shook her head. "Called us weak," she reminded the crystal being. "You laughed at our simple tools. Now you want to share our warmth? But this is still a competition." The Viridian warrior returned to its crystal palace, but its movements were slower than before. As the second night fell, the humans gathered around their network of fires. They were warm, fed, and rested. Around them, their competitors were failing one by one, but the humans were just getting started. "Tomorrow," Sungmin said as he added fuel to their fires, "we expand." Day 4 began with a sound that no one expected to hear in the frozen chamber. It was the sound of water dripping. The human base had grown so warm that ice was melting around its edges. Small pools of liquid water formed in areas that had been solid ice for thousands of years. Steam rose from the heated metal of Sunmin's expanded heat system in the control room. Alien scientists stared at their instruments in disbelief. The readings showed temperatures around the human camp that were impossible according to their calculations. 70 degrees above zero in a chamber designed to maintain -200, one scientist reported. "They have created a tropical zone in the middle of our ice hell." Commander Huck watched the humans move around their base without heavy coats. They had removed their winter clothes and worked in simple shirts. The deadliest environment the Galactic Council had ever created. They looked comfortable and relaxed. "Is this possible?" he asked. Sung-Min had spent the night making his greatest invention yet. Using debris from all 12 previous species attempts, he had built a complex system of metal pipes and chambers. It captured heat from their fires and distributed it through underground channels. He had melted into the ice, but the real breakthrough came from Bora's discovery about the ice itself. "It is not just frozen water," she explained to her teammates as she held up a chunk of blue ice. "This ice contains methane gas that has been trapped for millions of years. When we heat it carefully, the gas comes out and burns with incredible heat." She had learned to extract this gas safely and feed it into their heating system. The methane burned much hotter than their original fuel and lasted much longer. What had started as a small campfire was now a sophisticated energy production system. Dongwu had used his survival skills to create something even more impressive. He had found ways to hunt and gather food in the chamber, the organic materials. Frozen in the ice were not just fuel. Some were seeds from ancient plants. Others were eggs from tiny animals that lived in extreme cold. Life finds a way, Biora said, as she watched small green plants growing in pots made from salvaged metal. Even here, in this place designed for death, life was waiting for someone. To wake it up, the plants grew quickly in the warmth of their base. Soon they had fresh food growing in gardens that surrounded their heated shelters. The humans were not just surviving the test anymore. They were farming in it. The alien competitors were failing rapidly. The Nethan Explorer had become critically unstable. Its purple gas form kept condensing into liquid drops that froze to the chamber walls. It tried desperately to reach the warmth of the human base. But its movement was becoming slower and more confused. During the morning of day 4, it made one final attempt to approach the humans. Its form was barely holding together. As it drifted across the ice like a dying cloud, "Please," it whispered in a voice like wind through broken glass. "Help me. I am dying." Dongwu looked at the failing alien without expression. "You are in a survival test. Survival means making the choices that keep you alive. We chose to work together and innovate. You chose to compete and rely on your natural advantages. Now you face the consequences of your choice." The Nethan tried to force its way into the warm zone around the human base, but it no longer had the strength. Its gaseous form spread thinner and thinner until it could no longer maintain consciousness. By midday, the purple gas had condensed completely into frozen liquid. Scattered across the chamber floor, the first alien competitor was dead. The Viridian warriors were also in serious trouble. The stress fractures in their crystal bodies had grown larger and more numerous. The constant temperature changes between the heat of the human base and the cold of the rest of the chamber were destroying them slowly. One of the warriors approached. The humans in the afternoon. Its crystal form was so cracked it looked like it might shatter at any moment. "We underestimated you," it admitted in a voice like breaking ice. "Your species has abilities we did not recognize. Perhaps we could work together now, share knowledge and resources." Biora looked up from the garden she was tending. "Now you want to work together? After you spent 3 days telling each other how superior you were to us, after you watched us struggle and offered no help?" "The test has changed," the Viridian said desperately. "This is no longer about individual survival. You've made it about mastering the environment. We could learn from each other." Sunmin continued working on his latest invention without looking at the alien. "The test has not changed. You have simply realized that you are losing. But this is still a competition, and we intend to win it." The crystal being stood for a moment longer, then turned and walked slowly back to its damaged crystal shelter. Everyone could see that it would not survive much longer. The Scalan survivor remained deep in hibernation, but its life signs were growing weaker. Hibernation could preserve life for a while, but it could not create the energy needed for true survival. Without food or heat, it was slowly starving in its sleep. Meanwhile, the humans continued to expand their operation. They were no longer just surviving, or even just thriving. They were exploring and mapping the entire chamber Dongwu had discovered. That the chamber was much larger than anyone realized. Beyond the main testing area were tunnels and caverns that connected to other parts of the station. Some of these areas had resources that could be useful. "There are rooms filled with equipment from previous tests," he reported to his teammates. Tools, machines, even food supplies that were left behind when other species failed. The test makers never cleaned them out. Biora found evidence of an entire ecosystem frozen beneath the surface ice. Ancient bacteria, plant spores, and tiny animal eggs waited in suspended animation. With heat and water, they could be brought back to life. "We could create a complete living environment here," she said excitedly. "Not just a warm shelter, but an actual ecosystem that supports itself." Sungmin was already working on the engineering. Problems this would require? His heating system could be expanded to warm much larger areas. His water extraction methods could provide irrigation for massive gardens. His tool-making techniques could create everything they needed to build a permanent colony. By the end of day 4, the human base covered an area larger than a football field. They had multiple buildings connected by heated walkways. They had gardens producing fresh food. They had workshops where they built new tools and machines. They had storage areas filled with resources they had discovered and collected. Most importantly, they had turned the ice test from a survival challenge into a terraforming project in the control room. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the humans worked on their latest project. They were building what appeared to be a communications device using parts from all 12 previous attempts. "What are they doing now?" asked one of the scientists. Commander Huck studied the human construction with growing alarm. He said slowly, "They are trying to contact their ship." The implications of this were staggering. The humans could communicate with the outside. They could call for additional supplies, reinforcements, or technical support. They could turn the isolated test chamber into a connected outpost. "Should we stop them?" asked one of the council members. Hugh considered this carefully. The test rules say they can use any resources found within the chamber. Everything they are using was left behind by previous test subjects. Technically, they are not breaking any rules. But they are breaking the spirit of the test, protested a crystal being. This was supposed to be about individual survival, not about building a civilization. Huck replied thoughtfully. This is exactly what the test was designed to. Measure the ability of a species to adapt, survive, and thrive under impossible conditions. The humans are not just passing the test, they are redefining what it means to pass. As night fell on day 4, the humans gathered around a table made from salvaged metal to eat fresh vegetables grown in their gardens. Around them, their base hummed with the sound of machines and the warmth of multiple heat sources. 2 alien competitors were dead or dying. 1 remained in hibernation. And the humans were planning their next expansion. "Tomorrow," Sungmin said as he reviewed the blueprints for his latest invention, "we start phase 2. Day 5 began with the sound of breaking crystal. The remaining Viridian warrior collapsed near the entrance to its shelter. The stress fractures that had been growing through its body finally reached their limit. Pieces of living crystal fell away like broken glass, each piece making a high ringing sound as it hit the frozen ground. The alien tried to crawl toward the human settlement, leaving a trail of crystal fragments behind it. Its once beautiful form was now a spider web of cracks and missing pieces. The extreme temperatures had done what no weapon could do. They had shattered a being made of living diamond. "Help," it whispered in a voice that sounded like wind chimes breaking. "Please help me." Biora looked up from her expanded garden where she was harvesting fresh vegetables. The human settlement now covered an area the size of a small town. Warm air rose from dozens of heating vents Sungmin had built into the ground. Water flowed through channels he had carved in the ice. Plants grew in neat rows under artificial lights powered by their methane extraction system. 5 days ago, "You told us we were weak," Biora said calmly. "You laughed when we tried to make fire. You said your crystal bodies were superior to our soft flesh. Now you want our help because our weak human methods are keeping us alive while your superior bodies are failing." The Viridian warrior tried to speak again, but only made the sound of ice cracking. More pieces fell from its damaged form. "This is still a competition," Dongwu added as he walked past, carrying tools he had made from salvaged alien equipment. "In competitions, you do not help your opponents win." The crystal being collapsed completely. Its body broke apart into hundreds of glittering pieces that scattered across the chamber floor. The second alien competitor was dead. In the control room above, the watching aliens fell into shocked silence. Commander Huck stared at the screens, showing the human settlement. With something that looked like fear in his ice-blue eyes, "They have turned our test chamber into a colony," he said quietly. "Look at what they have built." The human settlement was indeed impressive. They had constructed permanent buildings using materials salvaged from 12 different alien attempts. Each building had a specific purpose. There was a workshop where Sungmin created new tools and machines, a laboratory where Biora studied the frozen ecosystem and brought ancient life back from the dead, a living area with beds, tables, and even primitive furniture. Most amazing of all was their agricultural dome. Using transparent materials from various alien equipment, they had built a greenhouse that trapped heat and light. Inside, plants from the ancient frozen seeds grew in carefully tended gardens. They had created a complete ecosystem that could support itself indefinitely. "They are not trying to survive 7 days," observed one of the alien scientists. "They are trying to build a permanent settlement." The humans had also expanded far beyond the original test area. Dongwu had discovered that the chamber connected 2 unused sections of the space station. Using his survival skills and Sungmin's engineering abilities, they had broken through sealed doors and explored areas that had been abandoned for centuries. In these forgotten sections, they found treasures beyond imagining: storage rooms full of equipment from failed tests, power systems that could be reactivated, even old alien technology that could be repurposed for their own use. "Look at this," Sungmin said as he activated a machine he had found in one of the abandoned sections. It was an alien water purification system that had been left behind by a species that failed the test 300 years ago. With some modifications, it now provided clean drinking water for their entire settlement. Boyer had made an even more significant discovery. In the deepest parts of the station, she had found a complete frozen ecosystem from an ancient alien world. Plants, animals, and microorganisms from a planet that had died millions of years ago were preserved in perfect condition. "We can bring an entire dead world back to life," she told her teammates excitedly. "Not just survive in this place, but make it into something better than it was before." The implications were staggering. The humans were not just passing the test, they were transforming it into something completely different. The last remaining alien competitor, the Scalan survivor, was still deep in hibernation, but its life signs were failing. Hibernation could preserve life for a while, but without food or heat. The reptilian alien was slowly dying in its sleep. Dong-Wu found the entrance to its burrow and studied the readings on a device he had built from salvaged equipment. "It will be dead by tomorrow," he reported. "Hibernation is not a survival strategy. It is just a way to die more slowly." The humans had won the competition, but they were not finished. Their communications device, built from parts of 12 different alien technologies, had successfully contacted their ship in orbit. Captain Tejo's voice came through, clearly despite the interference from the station's shields. "The Galactic Council is in chaos." His voice crackled through the speakers. "Half of them want to end the test immediately. They say what you are doing is impossible and must be cheating. The other half want to study how you are doing it." "Tell them we are not cheating," Suman replied. "We are doing exactly what the test was designed to measure. We are adapting, surviving, and thriving in conditions that were supposed to be impossible." "There is something else," the captain's voice continued. "Representatives from other alien species are requesting permission to visit the station. They want to see your settlement for themselves. Word is spreading across the galaxy that humans have done something no species has ever done before." Biora smiled as she looked around their thriving community. "Let them come. We will show them what human innovation can accomplish." As day 5 ended, the human settlement was bustling with activity. It had multiple projects running simultaneously. Sungmin was building a power plant using alien technology. Bora was establishing breeding programs for the ancient life forms she had discovered. Dongwu was exploring even more sections of the station and finding new resources every day. They had turned a test designed to break spirits into a demonstration of human potential. In his burrow, the Scalan survivor's breathing became slower and more shallow. By morning, the last alien competitor would be dead, leaving the humans as the only survivors of the ice test. But survival was no longer the goal. The humans had moved beyond survival to creation, beyond endurance to mastery, beyond just passing the test to redefining what the test could be. The galaxy was about to learn that humans did not just adapt to impossible situations, they transformed impossible situations into opportunities for growth. Day 7 arrived not with an ending, but with a beginning. The chamber doors were scheduled to open at exactly the same time they had closed 1 week ago. But when Commander Hugh and the Galactic Council arrived at the entrance, they found something that challenged everything they thought they knew about survival adaptation and what it meant to be a civilization. The doors opened to reveal not a frozen wasteland, but a thriving settlement. Warm air flowed out of the chamber, carrying the sense of growing plants and clean water. The temperature difference was so extreme that ice formed on the corridor walls as the heated air met the cold station atmosphere. "Impossible," whispered one of the alien observers. Where once there had been nothing but ice and death, now stood a small city. Buildings made from salvaged materials rose in organized rows. Gardens full of green plants stretched between them. Clear water flowed through channels carved in what had once been solid ice. The sound of working machinery hummed through the air. At the center of it all stood the three humans. They were not the desperate, freezing creatures the council expected to find. Sungmin wore a shirt he had woven from plant fibers grown in their settlement. Bira had flowers in her hair from species that had been extinct for millions of years. Dongwu looked rested and healthy. It's like a man who had spent a week at a comfortable resort rather than in a deadly survival test. "Welcome to our colony," Bora said with a smile. "We were hoping you would arrive soon. We have so much to show you." Commander Huck stepped carefully into the warm chamber, his forearms trembling slightly. The other council members followed, their faces showing emotions that ranged from amazement to fear. "The test was supposed to end today," Hugh said weakly. "End?" Sungmin looked confused. "Why would we end now? We are just getting started. Would you like to see our power plant? Or perhaps our agricultural dome? We have successfully revived 3 different extinct ecosystems." The council members walked through the settlement in stunned silence. Everything they saw challenged their understanding of what was possible. The humans had not just survived the ice test. They had conquered it so completely that it was no longer a test of survival, but a demonstration of colonization. "Where are the other competitors?" asked one of the crystal beings, though the answer was obvious from the scattered debris. "Around the settlement, they died," Dongwu said simply. "They tried to resist the environment instead of working with it. They competed against each other instead of competing against the challenge itself. They used their natural advantages instead of developing new abilities." "But you used their deaths to your advantage," observed a gas creature with something like horror in its voice. "We used their equipment," Biora corrected. "They left behind tools and materials when they failed. We turned their failure into our success. That is what adaptation means." Chuck found himself standing before a memorial the humans had built, listed the names of all 12 species that had died in previous tests, including the 3 that had died alongside the humans in this attempt. "You honor those who failed?" he asked. "We honor those who tried," Sungmin replied. "Their attempts taught us what did not work. Their equipment gave us the materials we needed to find what did work. Every failure contributed to our success." The tour continued through facilities that seemed impossible. The humans had built a complete life support system that could operate indefinitely. They had workshops that produced tools and equipment superior to much of what the Galactic Council used. They had laboratories where ancient life forms were being studied and preserved. Most impressive of all was their expansion beyond the original chamber. The humans had opened connections to abandoned sections of the station and were actively exploring and colonizing them. "You have turned our testing facility into your own space station," Hugh said with growing alarm. "We have improved it," Dongwu corrected. "These abandoned sections were wasted space. We have made them productive." "Would you like to see our manufacturing facilities? We are producing equipment that your own engineers might find interesting." Council members exchanged worried looks. They'd come to judge whether humans deserved a place in galactic civilization. Instead, they found themselves being given a tour of human civilization by beings who seemed to have moved far beyond the need for their approval. "The test is over," Huck said firmly. "You have survived 7 days. You have earned membership." In the Galactic Council, the 3 humans looked at each other and smiled. "Thank you," Biora said politely. "We are not interested in just membership anymore. What do you mean?" The commander asked. Sung-Min gestured toward their thriving settlement. "A week ago we came here as applicants hoping to join your civilization. But in that week, we have built something that surpasses what you offered us." "Why would we want to join you when we can build something better ourselves." The implications of this statement sent shockwaves through the alien observers. The humans were not asking to join the Galactic Council anymore. They were suggesting that the Galactic Council should ask to join them. However, Dongwu added diplomatically, "We are interested in trade and cooperation. You have technologies we could use. You have innovations you might find valuable." "What kind of innovations?" asked a council scientist, unable to hide his curiosity. Bara led them to her laboratory where dozens of species that had been extinct for millions of years were thriving in carefully controlled environments. "We have learned to bring the dead back to life," she said simply. "Not just individual creatures, but entire ecosystems. We can restore worlds that have been destroyed by war, disaster, or time itself." Sungmin showed them his workshop where machines built from salvaged parts were producing materials, stronger and more efficient than anything in the Council's databases. "We have learned to create advanced technology from primitive resources," he explained. "We can build sophisticated equipment anywhere, using whatever materials are available. No planet is too hostile, no situation too desperate." Them to his command center where displays showed maps of the station's forgotten sections and plans for their continued exploration. "We have learned to turn any environment into a home," he said. "Ice worlds, gas giants, asteroid fields, even the empty space between stars. Wherever humans go, we can build civilization." The council members realized they were no longer looking at test subjects, they were looking at teachers. "What do you want from us?" Commander Huck asked quietly. The three humans exchanged glances and smiled. "Partnership," Biora said. "Not membership in your council, but cooperation between equals. You have knowledge of the galaxy. We have the ability to transform it." "Trade agreements," Sungmin added. "You have access to resources. We have the technology to use those resources in ways you have never imagined." "Friendship," Dongwu concluded. "You have shown us your greatest challenge. We have shown you our greatest strength. Now let us work together to build something neither of us could achieve alone." As the council members prepared to leave, they carried with them samples of human innovation, recordings of human achievements, and a completely new understanding of what the species called humanity could accomplish. The ice test had been designed to break human spirits. Instead, it had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. Not conquerors who took what they wanted, but builders who created what they needed. Not destroyers who eliminated obstacles, but innovators who transformed obstacles into opportunities. Captain Tejo's voice came through the communication. "System one last time as the settlement prepared for its next phase of growth. The Council has agreed to our terms," he reported. "Full partnership status, trade agreements with 17 different species, requests for human assistance with 12 different terraforming projects across the galaxy." "And the ice test?" Sungmin asked. "Permanently retired?" the captain replied with obvious satisfaction. "They have decided that no future species should be subjected to a challenge that humans have made obsolete." As the chamber doors closed for the final time, the three humans stood in their warm, thriving settlement and looked toward the future. They had come to prove humanity deserved a place among the stars. Instead, they had proven that humanity would remake the stars themselves. The galaxy would never be the same.